Hey, my friends, Mary Rose here. Welcome back to our live streams on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm your host, Mary Rose Wood. I'm here to talk to you about story structure, writing craft. I'm here to answer your questions about writing and hopefully help illuminate some of the ongoing mysteries that close the gap between the books that we admire that made us want to be a writer in the first place and the sometimes disappointing products of our own work, wherever we may be in our own writer's journey. There is a way to close that gap, and I'm here to help you do it. Okay, so let me say hi to everybody who's out there. Hey, Terry, good to see you. I know there's a Facebook user out there, and hey, Facebook user who just said hello. If that's you, just know that I can't see quite who you are. Cynthia, wonderful to see you again. We've got a wonderful little crew of regulars, and it's really terrific to see how committed you are to engaging with your own writing process. You know, in order to change, we have to let go of the old way of doing things to make space for a new way of doing things. And when I see you guys coming back week after week after week, I know that you're taking this to heart and that you're willing to grapple with basically the process of learning. And that is a hero's journey all its own, right? So welcome. Okay, today we're going to talk about the Alec Baldwin Rule. So I'm going to keep it clean, but anybody who wants to go, if you don't know what I'm talking about today and you want to go over to YouTube and watch this clip from the film Glengarry Glen Ross, just know it is definitely a not safe for work kind of clip. David Mamet, what can I say? The Alec Baldwin Rule. All right. Well, when Alec Baldwin said it, actually what David Mamet wrote, it was always be closing. A, always, B, C, closing. Always be closing, right? It's a wonderful scene from a really polished film about a bunch of, hapless real estate sales guys, and Alec Baldwin plays this character who exhorts them not to be such losers, and he does it in a wonderfully aggressive, monstrously foul-mouthed way, and it's all kind of hilarious. Good grown-up fun. But here's the point, my friends. Always be closing is not bad advice if your job is to sell stuff, because the point of your job is to make the sale. And it's good to remember what the point of your job is. When you forget what the point of your job is, you are less likely to do a good job at your job. Common sense, right? I have adapted this fantastic bit of screenwriting to one of the many Mary Roseisms in the Path of the Storyteller program. My version of the Alec Baldwin Rule is, are you ready for it? Always tell story. Always tell story. A, always, T, tell, S, story. Always tell story. Now, I say this, and I use the reference to that fun scene for the very same reasons that the Alec Baldwin character advises his team to do this. Don't forget what your job is. What's your job? If you're a writer, is your job to put words on the page? It's how you do your job, but it isn't your job. The Alec Baldwin Rule in Path of the Storyteller is always tell story, because I want all of you to remember that your job is to tell story. The words on the page are the materials that you use to convey story from here, the writer's head, out there, the reader's head. They are a means of transport. They are your materials, just the same way that a painter's materials might include a canvas, oil paints, paintbrush, turpentine, right? When we want to talk to a painter and we want to say, what's your main job? It's not always by turpentine. It's not always clean your brushes. These are things that are part of the practice, but that's not the point of the job, right? And so this is why we always tell story. Now, It's funny. It's easy to remember. That's why I like it. Anybody who knows my incorrigible children of Ashton Plays books know how much I love a pithy wise saying. I think it's a great way to learn to put things in little slogans so you can remember them. But we have to unpack this slogan and make it something practical that you can use. So that's what I want to talk about today. And as ever, your comments and questions are extremely welcome, and I'll do my best to get to all or most of them before we finish. Okay, practical. What does it mean to always tell story? Quick recap. And I know I've talked about this in the past, so there are some other live streams you can go to on the channel if you want to dive a little deeper or get a review about the concept of just how to know what your story is in the first place. Clearly, if your job is to always tell story, you have to have clarity about what story you're telling. So in the past, we've talked about how to know what your story is, the necessity of knowing what your story is, and how to achieve the clarity of knowing that would enable you to be able to communicate your story in a sentence, right? In a sentence, that kind of clarity. And so once you've got that clarity of what that story is in terms of the length of your whole narrative, your book length narrative, if you're writing a novel, which I think most of you are or would like to be, what does that look like on the page, right? So a sentence is helpful in terms of clarity. Writing it on a Post-it note, sticking it in the corner of your laptop screen so you never forget what story you're telling. Writers do all of these kinds of things to keep themselves honest. But what does that then look like on the page? So right away, when I say always tell story, look at the word tell in the middle of there. What I'm talking about is the collision that happens when we have to rub our heads and pat our tummies at the same time, right? We have to bear in mind the clarity, the simplicity of the story. And we also have to engage in the line by line, sentence by sentence practice of putting words on the page to convey that story. It's two very different things. The Path of the Storyteller program, for those of you that have been through it, you know this, for those of you who are curious about it, is actually broken into two parts for this very reason. And the first part is all about story structure. And we get that kind of under our belts before daring to add the confusion of, okay, now about writing craft. How do we convey all of this on the page? So what I'm going to offer you today, it's not going to solve all your problems, but I think it'll give you a new way of thinking about it and an introduction to this sort of complicated like membrane, right? That we have to make permeable between the story and what actually gets told. Always tell story. All right. Let me tell you about something else that we do at Path of the Storyteller. When people finish the program, many of them choose to continue on in a membership called Storyteller Circle. And one of the things we do at Storyteller Circle is put people's work in the hot seat. That sounds challenging, but it's not a hot seat. It's a warm embrace of love and support, right? And what that means is that we take an actual piece of writing and we look at it line by line together, and we try to apply everything we know about story structure and writing craft to the writer's work with their guidance, with their permission and encouragement. And what happens when we get into a hot seat situation is the first question that we always come up with: where's the storytelling? Now, these hot seat submissions might be short. They might be a paragraph. They might be a page or two. They might be a short scene, right? We're taking our time to go line by line through one of the students' work. But the question is always the same: where's the storytelling? Because the expectation is that even if you are sharing a paragraph, it has storytelling in it. Always tell story. So what does it mean to look for the storytelling in a piece of text? Your book has a story that you're clear about, and it derives from the hero's mission, right? And again, we've done past talks about knowing what the hero's singular mission is, the singular kind of balance beam or line of dominoes. You see these sort of narrow focused images that I use to try to communicate this. The singular mission that your hero is on, that is actually kind of the spine of the book. It is the story. It is the adventure that they go on in order to achieve the journey of transformation that it's all about. But that long book length arc is made of parts, right? It's made of individual scenes. Those scenes have a shape, first act, second act, third act, right? That's story structure. But even within the acts, there are individual scenes, incidents, episodes, however you want to break them down. Some people might think a chapter is a scene, but that's not always the case. We might sometimes include several scenes in a chapter. Here's how I think of a scene. It's your hero who we know has a single mission that they're on, and that the point of that mission is to effect a transformation of consciousness. This scene is like a slice of that mission. It is a component part, right? There's all kinds of imagery you can use, like, like the body has limbs and the limbs have cells and the cells have DNA. Like, things can be broken down into their component parts. So, and within each of those parts, right, there is this kind of imprint of the whole. So what we do when we break down the component parts of our hero's book length journey into its parts is we are inventing slices, episodes. What I use always is the hero's journey, energetic movements, as a way to delineate and understand these episodes. But in simple terms for today, each one of them is basically your hero taking some step, making some attempt to move toward the accomplishment of that mission. And so some of these scenes may be what we call for example, an invitation to adventure scene where the terms of the mission are presented. That is a scene that, in effect, it's necessary, right? In order for the hero to get on their mission, the moment where they are presented with it and is necessary. So those scenes will almost inevitably be part of your book, right? The scene where your hero says, that's not something I could ever see myself doing. That's not who I am. I'm not up to it. I'm afraid. Those are refusal type scenes that are inevitably part of a narrative, because if your hero was able to do the thing at the beginning of the book, they wouldn't need to go on this journey of transformation. So by definition, whatever adventure it is that's presented to your hero is daunting. It's outside their comfort zone, right? That's how change happens. So those are the kinds of first act scenes that might come. In the second act, we have test after test after test. Your hero now knows what mission they're on. They've accepted the call. They are on it. They're on the path. They're proceeding down the yellow brick road. And so now scene after scene after scene, there's going to be obstacles, right? Things that get in the way of achieving the mission. So I'm just reminding you of all of this so you understand what I mean by a scene. Because what we're talking about now is moving into the realm of putting story into language. And so now we have to start talking about the small, the micro structure, as opposed to the macro structure that we've talked about quite a bit in the past. So when we get into the world of the scene, we are in a sense, we are in the smallest unit of storytelling that is still recognizably structured like a story, right? We are in a portion of the book. Maybe it's a page, maybe it's a couple of pages, maybe it is a full chapter, and that may vary, right? Depending on the complexity of the scene and where we are in the book. But we're in a component where the hero is going to have some fresh test, some fresh challenge, some fresh experience that they're going to have to react to, maybe resist, maybe accept, right? Eventually they're going to accept, otherwise there's no scene. And then have to execute whatever it is that is before them, right? And it's going to push them outside of their comfort zone, because that is how transformation happens. Over and over and over again, your hero is going to be pushed outside of their comfort zone. That means their comfort zone is going to be changing, because once we're pushed outside of our comfort zone, it tends to recalibrate. The goalposts move. What we couldn't do yesterday, we can do today, which means that the test that comes to challenge us tomorrow has to be even a little tougher, right? So we're never stepping into the same river twice, if you will, when it comes to designing the many, many scenes that will comprise an entire narrative. So in a scene, the hero's got something new to do. They've got to take it on. It's going to push them outside of their comfort zone. They're going to maybe exceed their own expectations of what they're capable of, or maybe they'll try and not be able to. But there's an outcome. And I like to say win, lose, or draw, right? Either they triumph over this new challenge and get to the next step, or they fail utterly. They're outmatched. They weren't ready for this. It was too hard. And then it becomes often the doorway to an even greater challenge, because they tried to do something and they failed, and now they're in hotter water than before. Now they've got now they're in a worse situation than before. So that's a way to escalate the tests, you see, is to throw in these failed attempts to do things, or failed attempts to defend oneself. So win, lose, or draw. Sometimes it's a little ambiguous what the outcome is. But your hero may have to regroup, re-strategize, right? It was a narrow escape, that kind of feeling, right? So if you think about what I'm saying, you'll realize that I've just pretty much described the full range of possibilities of a scene. The hero's got something new to deal with, and it's win, lose, or draw at the end, right? Like that's it. So I'm describing that as like the smallest component of your book that has all of the qualities of an entire story, right? You can think of them as a snow globe. It's like a little snow globe version of the whole universe of the book. Now, here's what's important to remember. Every one of these little snow globes of adventure is a domino. I'm mixing my metaphors horribly here, but just imagine this. Your hero has this book-length mission that's crystal clear in your mind. You can say it in a sentence. And so each one of these little slices, these recognizable snow globes of storytelling, is in a sense complete unto itself, but it is also in service to the journey, the linear journey, the crossing of that balance beam, the next toppling of the domino, and then the next domino that gets our hero to the scene that was promised the reader, right? The fulfillment of this mission. So the snow globes are not random. They are not just a collection of the next thing that you think of. They are absolutely parts of a puzzle. Like they are all about the mission. They are each the next logical step that your hero takes in pursuit of the larger mission. So I've broken this down now from the book length, always tell story, know what the story is. That's what the whole book is about and nothing else. And now I'm taking it down to the chapter, right? Where or the scene, really, the scene in which you are building like all of the little steps. You're lining up all the little dominoes that take your hero from the beginning part to the end. Once we get into the scene, and now we come back to what it's like to be in the hot seat at Storyteller Circle, and your colleagues look at you and we say, okay, now here's the scene that you wrote. Where's the storytelling? What does it look like on the page? And now we tiptoe with trepidation into the realm of language. You guys still with me? I know this is heady stuff. We're putting a lot out there for you. I'm laying it all out for you. Okay. When we are in the realm of the actual writing of the scene, now we have to look at it line by line, sentence by sentence. Presumably, as writers, we have thought about this scene. We have thought about this scene in terms of what the hero's mini adventure is. What are they trying to accomplish? What is their objective? The old actor's joke. I'm sure Alec Baldwin knows this well. What's my motivation? The actor says. Why do I say these lines? And of course the answer is always because you're getting paid to say the lines. It's your job. But in order to fulfill the storytelling of the scene, you must give your hero a motivation. There's an objective. If there's a moment at the end of the scene where the reader says, I got it, win, lose, or draw, I know what the outcome was. I know what was at stake in the scene. I know what the hero did to accomplish it or to attempt to accomplish it. And I know what the outcome is. Not only that, I, as the reader, I'm talking from the reader's perspective now, I have a sense of expectation now because based on the outcome of this scene, I have a sense of wanting to know what would come next. What would be the consequences of this victory, of this failure, or of this, ambiguous or ambivalent, like, okay, that was a narrow escape. We've got to rethink feeling, right? The draw outcome. So the hero's objective must be clear. There's a whole structure embedded, an entire hero's journey, if you will, embedded in this like component of the scene. Now, when you start putting words on the page to write a scene, sometimes we are not clear about this. Sometimes we're drafting in an exploratory way. We're drafting in a way that's kind of improvisational. We have a notion of what the scene might be, or we have an idea of an encounter that our hero might have with another character or a place they might go. And so we write to generate material, and that is an appropriate use of the drafting process. But at some point, my friends, either before you draft the scene, while you're drafting the scene, or after you have a draft of the scene, you must ask yourself, where's the storytelling? What is this scene about? What is my hero trying to accomplish in this scene? What obstacles get in their way? What must they do strategically to get past those obstacles, right? And just as in a full story the second act is the longest part of a story. I know you guys know this now. In the 3-act structure, the second act is basically the bulk of it. Change does not happen all in a hot rush, right? There are many, many, many tests. Our hero has to make incremental change over a long series of obstacles. Well, it can be just the same in a scene, It's not just one test and the whole thing is over. You can write a very short scene in which your hero encounters 4 or 5, 10 different obstacles on the way to achieving their goal for the scene, right? And that means that you have to keep thinking of new strategies, new obstacles, and new responses. And that is what is on the page. That is the storytelling on the page, the actions your hero takes in pursuit of what it is that they want, the obstacles that arise to get in their way, to push them outside of their comfort zone, and then what your hero does in response. So there's this kind of dance back and forth. I like to use the word beats because I was trained in the theater a million years ago, and that is a very familiar way for me to think about this. But each sort of move and counter move within the structure of a scene, we can think of as a beat, right? I want to get out of this scene. My objective for this scene is there's one slice of pizza on the table and I want it. I don't want anyone else to have it. I want to have it, right? So maybe my first move is to ask, Does anybody else want that slice of pizza? And the reaction is, we're still thinking about it. Okay, I can't take it yet. Okay, well, I can wheedle, I can make a show of how hungry I am, I can create a distraction so that I can steal the pizza while nobody's looking. I can come up with 10 ways to get my hands on the last slice of pizza. At the end of the scene, as a writer, if I'm writing the scene, the reader should know all of this. The reader should know what the hero's after, and they should be able to follow along with a kind of knowing enjoyment of like, oh, look what they're doing now. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, look what they're trying now. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, now look, they're actually stealing the pizza. They're getting into, fisticuffs with their relatives, whatever. At the end of the scene, they either got the pizza or they didn't. It's win, lose, or draw. Win, they got the pizza. Lose, they didn't get the pizza. Draw, nobody gets the pizza. It's on the floor and the dog is lapping it up off the carpet, right? So the reader needs to be able to follow this. This is the storytelling of the scene. So that's what's on the page. Now, you're looking at me, maybe through wherever you're looking at me right now, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or watching the replay on my blog, and you're saying, but that's not what's on the page. There were words on the page. What about the description? What about dialogue? What about sentences and paragraphs and all that stuff? Always tell story. Always tell a story. You have to always tell story. The words that you're putting on the page tell story. That's why they're there. Let's talk about some of these things. Here's a big one. Description. Don't I need description? Like, description doesn't really tell story. I mean, I could get that the action scene where they both grab the pizza at the same time and fight over it ends up on the floor. Like, okay, that's the story. But don't I need to describe things? You do need to describe things for reasons that we have talked about in the past. The reader wants to imagine this in their brain, like a movie they're watching in their head. We call that the fictional dream. It should be vivid as a dream, right? The reader should be absolutely sucked in. They should be able to taste the marinara and smell the oregano. But the description must tell story. What does it mean? First of all, what are you describing? Are you describing the furniture? Are you describing, are you describing the portraits on the walls? What are you describing? You can't describe everything. You must choose what to describe. You're an artist. You're creating an experience for your reader. It is curated and selected. So you are going to choose what to describe based on what is part of the story. You might describe the pizza in loving detail and not trouble yourself, right, to describe many other things that are in the room. Not every detail is relevant, right? There's no generic detail in good fiction, right? There's only what I call inflected detail. So the smell of the pizza is a very good thing to describe because that's what our hero's after. But you can spend time describing that. You can spend time describing your hero's adversaries, right? So that we get a sense of what your hero's up against. But you must describe them in a way that is like drawn from storytelling, that is connected, that has this kind of gossamer energetic thread that connects it to the storytelling. Once you are just ladling on generic details that have nothing to do with the storytelling, the reader knows immediately. And all it does is it allows them to disengage because they're just waiting to get back to whether or not the hero's going to get the pizza or not. Like, that is fundamentally what they're engaged with. But you can include a lot of good writing to flesh out the storytelling so that it becomes a high stakes test for your hero. It's up to you to decide how high the stakes are at this moment of the tale for your particular hero. Here's my little cat behind me. She loves to come help. She loves to come help when I'm on YouTube. You decide how important is this scene, right? How important is it to the hero? So you have to do the storytelling, right? You use all the techniques of prose. You can use description. You can use dialogue, right? But dialogue is not chit chat. Dialogue is storytelling. The conversation that your characters have in this scene, all of it has to do with the hero's objective, right? All of it does. If there are conversations that have to do with nothing else, look at them and say, well, what am I doing with this conversation? Am I presenting it to give my hero a sense of, a clue as to how they could distract this character, right? To get the pizza away from them. I keep using this pizza example, which is silly, but I just want you to understand how literally everything in the scene is telling the story that you've decided this scene tells. So your hero's objective, the obstacles, the arena of combat, if you will, that's the setting, what is said, what is not said, and importantly, what goes through the mind of your hero during the scene are all focused on the storytelling. Okay. One useful way to think of this, if you will, again, it's a movie image, but movies are such a visual way to tell story that maybe this will help you understand. Although it's the same as theater, right? When a scene is shot in a film, there's a set, right? There's a setting, there's a designed set, there's a room that they're in or an outdoor place. The scene takes place in some physical location, right? There's lighting. The scene is lit a certain way. And there's almost always music, right? Most movies end up with musical scores that are quite substantial part of our feelings while we watch them. So I just want you to consider that in a movie, the person who does the lighting and the person who designs the setting, the other person who designs the clothes that the actors wear, and the composer who writes the music, they're not working independently. They are all hyper focused on what story the scene is telling. What is the feeling here? Where's the tension? Where does our hero's fortune change? Where do they feel defeated? Where do they feel triumphant, right? What is at stake? How serious is this? What is the tone of it? And I really actually challenge you to think this way, to try to be a little bit technical next time you watch a good movie, and just see how the lighting, the costuming, the setting, the music, all is designed to help tell the story of the scene, right? It's not just in the actors' performances. All of these things tell story if they're done well. Now, as writers, we have to do the same thing, but we do it all with language. We don't get a costumer or a lighting designer or a musical score to come in and fill out the draft that we wrote so that the reader really gets what the storytelling is. We put all of that in. We put that in the description, in the dialogue, in the rhythm of the language that we use. That's the art of writing craft, is to be able to pack the actual words on the page with storytelling in every sentence so that it's all part of the storytelling. I hope that makes sense. Now, I want to add one thing here. Like any good rule, the always tell story rule has a corollary. It has a secondary rule that goes with it, and it kind of implies, but I think it's worth laying out separately. The word always is comprehensive, right? Like always is always. There is no time outside of always. When we say always, we mean the whole thing, right? All of it. So this is sort of implied when we say always tell story, but the corollary is only tell story. If we're always telling story, there isn't anything else, right? There isn't a sentence on the page that fails to know or engage with or express in some way what the central storytelling of that scene is. And here's why this is important. Here's why the Alec Baldwin rule is important and why its corollary is important. Always tell story and only tell story. They are important because the reader trusts you. The reader trusts you. The reader wants to trust you. The reader wants to feel that they're in good hands. And what that means is that the reader will start your book in a state of expectation, just like we start on new things. Like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. And then we start, and then reality sets in, and we form our opinions. They start your book assuming that everything you tell them matters. Why would you tell it to them? Why would you burden their attention with this fact or that fact or this description or introducing this character, right? Or sharing this backstory, or all the things that you're going to end up putting on the page? Why would you do that to your reader unless you intended for them to remember it? Everything is important, right? The reader starts out saying, okay, it's here for a reason. This is it, right? If you betray that trust, if you start littering the page with stuff, by which I mean words that don't really have to do with the storytelling, the reader's going to know right away. And pretty soon they're going to lose trust. They're going to say, all right, I'll keep reading, but I'm going to skim because half of this stuff doesn't matter. Now, what's going to happen to that reader? Are they going to finish your book? No. It's going to be one of those situations that we've all been in, alas, where we start to read something and even think of the language we use. I couldn't get into it. Didn't grab me. It didn't hold my interest. It wasn't for me. I put it down. We sometimes will say, oh, it's not my kind of book, or, whatever. But the truth is, most of us find it an effort to pay attention. Paying attention requires energy. And even if we love to read, we need to be engaged with what we're reading, or we're not going to finish it, no matter how much we love to read. And for writers, this really, we've got to, we got to sit up straight about this. We have to take responsibility for the fact that our work demands an investment of time and attention from the reader. And if we are trustworthy, if we start our books in a framework, holding ourselves to really the gold standard, I consider this the gold standard. Always tell story is the gold standard here of what we end up with on the page. If we can live up to that gold standard, the reader will go with us anywhere. They will savor every sentence we give them because every sentence we give them matters. They will stick with us no matter how long the book is. How long a book feels is not a reflection of how many pages it is. It's a reflection of how compressed the storytelling is. If every line tells story, that book flies by and the reader won't want it to end. This is true. You know it from your own reading. Okay, so if you break trust with the reader by not holding yourself up to the gold standard, you're going to lose them. And that's not the point. So I'm going to wrap up now my remarks about this. But I definitely want to hear what your questions might be, because I do think that this is it's a very important, very, very important thing to think about. That knowing what the overarching mission of the book is essential, but also knowing what goes on scene by scene by scene. That's the reader's experience, and that's the storytelling lives or dies, right, in those sentences that you choose. So when you only tell story, it really does mean that you don't bother to include anything that's not related. But the truth is, in our early drafts, sometimes we write stuff that is related to the storytelling, but we haven't expose that. We may draft a kind of generic description or of something that is related to the storytelling, but we haven't thought consciously yet about why is this part of the storytelling? Why is this information an essential part of the storytelling? In revision, we may say, oh, this belongs here, but I've just, I haven't made it so the reader can see the connection. And so then you'll just recast it so that it is an essential part of the storytelling. The storytelling can't proceed without it. It's important information. All right. So just remember, the reader comes to you for a story. If they wanted words, they could get words from the dictionary. I myself don't mind browsing the dictionary for entertainment now and then. I don't go to the dictionary for a story, though. When I pick up a novel, I'm there for the story. That is why the readers come to you. I hope that you love words. I hope you love language. I hope you love it like I do. And I hope you take seriously the power that words have to convey the story of your own devising into the mind of a reader. It's an incredible tool. Words are, they're amazing. A symphony orchestra is nice. A movie's nice. A painting's good. I'm sorry, a novel, a great classic novel, there's nothing better. And so use your words the way a writer uses words, right? A writer uses words to tell story. That's your job. That's your job, people. Now, Alec Baldwin, he yanked off his giant gold watch at the end of the scene and put it down and snarls into somebody's face. This watch costs more than your car. I'm not going to do that to you. I don't need to bully you into always telling story. You want to do it? I know you do. You want your book to work. You want your writing to have that special quality that your favorite books have, to just immerse the reader in a lived experience, something that they'll never forget, and they'll feel like it happens to them. There's a lot to pulling off that particular hat trick. There's a lot of story structure. There's a lot of writing craft, but this is the gold standard, right? Your reader comes to you for a story. That is what you must give them. If they want words, they can go to the dictionary, right? But don't beat yourselves up that this is something that's just going to spill out of you in your first draft. This is where having the writing craft, having the awareness of, oh, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm generating material. I'm deciding what story I want to tell. I'm revising my material into the shape of story. And it's going to take many revisions that are applied not by ear, but with intention in order to achieve that gold standard. But I'm telling you, my friends, once you do achieve that gold standard, you will write scenes that work. They will simply work. People will read them and they will be satisfied. They'll want to know what happens next. That is the mark of a scene that works. It's not an exploration of every impulse you had while you were drafting. It is the end result, the final draft, when it's unimprovable, and that will take a lot of work and many revisions. It will be solid, right? When you push one domino over, the rest will fall. It will be a beautiful thing. It's just a satisfying thing when you finally get all the pieces lined up that way. It's satisfying for you, and it's satisfying for your reader. And isn't that why we're here? All right. So that's my talk today. Always tell story. I'm just going to double check in the comments before we wrap up to see if anybody's got any particular questions about this. I see a bunch of you watching, which is awesome, but I don't see any questions. If you don't have any now, that's okay. If you have questions later, by all means, please put them in the comments. And this is true for those of you who are watching the replay as well. Put them in the comments. I will see them and I will answer them. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. I hope it makes you feel excited and knowing what to do, knowing what the gold standard is, just like the heroes of our stories. If we don't know what we're aiming for, we are not that likely to achieve it. It's not going to get there by accident, right? Our books are not going to structure themselves, right? We learned this in another talk. You are the boss of your book. It's going to be fundamentally up to you to do the work that refines your draft into a beautiful scene that tells story and leaves the reader wanting more. And I know you can do it. All right. Thank you so much for being here and for participating. I look forward to seeing you next time. And by the way, if you're not on my mailing list, this is a very important time to get on. It's www.pathofthestoryteller.com. And enrollment for the fall running of the Path of the Storyteller flagship course is, the enrollment's going to open soon. There's a waiting list, and don't tell anyone, but the people on the waiting list are going to get a chance to enroll a little sooner, and that might matter to you if you're eager, because I am going to limit the amount of seats in the course. It is a wonderfully personal experience. I love my students. I get to know them and their work very well. And I can't wait to get started with a new group in the fall, and maybe you'll be one of them, but get on the mailing list so that you don't miss the notifications about that. Okay. Just go to that www.pathofthestoryteller.com and sign up. Okay. Be well, everyone. Happy writing, and I will see you next week.